Merkel Media.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
It's a big club.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Day by
Theratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Mumbai Kutapi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash.
$10 in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison?
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the Sears hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you are watching us on Rockfin, Odyssey, or Band.video, or you're listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks a million. We appreciate your amazing support. We could not do this show without the help of our sponsors. They've been fantastic to us. My Patriot Supply has been nice enough to build us a landing page called preparewithmacroaggressions.com. My God, considering what's going on in the world these days, if you are not ready by at least having some storable food, you probably should get on that now, sooner rather than later. In fact, they're currently having a special. And they're giving $250 off of a 3-month supply of emergency food. I'm not really sure how long this promo is going to last. They say it's the best deal they've had on it in 3 years. So I will take them at their word. I don't know if this is going to be available forever, but I'll tell you what, jump on it, take care of it, sort it all out in about 10 minutes. If you've got a family member that maybe lives, out of state, you want to make sure that they're hooked up. You could be a nice person. You could take care of them as well. Go to the website, preparewithmacroaggressions.com. My God, be a month or two early than a day late on this. And also to Chemical Free Body, they've been nice enough to sponsor this show. I've been drinking their products now for 2 years. Tim James is a mad scientist over there. He's making fantastic vitamins in a world where vitamins are kind of sketchy. They've got the best stuff out there. I'm telling you. I even made he put me through the 90-day gut and toxin detox program last summer, and I lost so much weight I had to go buy new clothes, and I didn't have any weight to lose, which is kind of scary. So I'll tell you what, if you want to see the results that I had, you can go to chemicalfreebody.com/macro and just take a look and see what this package is. I stand behind this 100%, but so does Tim too. If you don't like it, you can return it. He'll give you I think he gives you like twice your money back. So I don't think he's had many people take him up on that, but it is, it's amazing. You'll get 2 containers of green 85 juice formula. You'll get a bottle of gut detox, toxin detox, probiotics, and ultra enzymes. It's just capsules. You just take it, and the drink is just green drink. You mix it up with water or juice, drink it in the morning. Real easy. So if you are in the market, if you are trying to get yourself healthy, if you figured, well, you know what? I'm done with all the excuses. Let's try and let's turn this ship around. Go to chemicalfreebody.com/macro. Use the promo code macro on your way out to save yourself a little bit of money. Well, I've been waiting for this one for a while since she teased the book. It's Whitney Webb. She's back. She's got not one, but 2 books out. One Nation Under Blackmail, volumes 1 and 2. We're finally allowed to talk about it. Good to see you. How you doing? Good to have you back.
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be done with the book because it consumed my life.
I know.
Because at the same time, I had like a baby. So
I know what it's like to write a book. I don't know what it's like to write a book while having a baby, though. That is tough.
Yeah, it was mental. So I am happy to have a life back again, but I'm gradually learning what it's like to not be a work slave again. You kind of get used to like being stuck in the writing cave and working nonstop, deadlines, whatever. So I'm glad that's behind me, to say the least. So I just hope people read the book now. That's
okay. So we'll start it off with my little advertisement for it, which is that I bought both of the books you can go to trineday.com, TRINEDAY.com, and find them there, pre-order them, right? They're not fully, I've ordered them, but I obviously haven't gotten them yet. You sent me a digital copy, so I was able to kind of get ahead and start reading them in advance of this. And I can tell you guys with 100% honesty here, you need to buy these books. You need to buy them like right away. I thought I understood this stuff and I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And then I started reading your books, and they're big. They're big books. They're very detailed. And I would say, who is this guy? I've never heard of this guy before. And he's connected to that guy. And I was like, this is a masterpiece. Okay. I'm about I'm 3/4 of the way done with book 2. I went out of order. I started reading book 2 before book 1. And you know, when it comes to like footnotes and things like this, and, you know, everyone says, well, you're talking about crazy stuff. And you're like, you have to show your work. There was one chapter of yours that I read in the second book, and I forget which one it was. And at the end of that one chapter, there were over 200 footnotes just in that one chapter.
Yeah.
It didn't give anyone any place to go. Anyone that wants to come in and say, oh, this is a bunch of bullshit or whatever.
Yeah, that was the plan.
Yeah. It is well sourced, like incredibly, impeccably well sourced. How long did it take to write these?
Way too long. It was a lot of, I write fast, right? So I don't know if people like remember, but my original like series on Epstein at Mint Press, I wrote that in like a month or something while writing other stuff. And I started this book in 2020, but really most of it ended up being written between it took about a year to write while doing other stuff too and having a baby and whatever. So it was a lot of work for me. It was pretty brutal. So well, I'm really glad you appreciate it. Then that makes me really happy. Because basically what I did want to do was give people very little room to be like, haha, conspiracy theorists. This makes no, I didn't just like put in a lot of footnotes. They're like authoritative source footnotes too. Either like mainstream media archives or, newspaper archives, congressional reports, police reports, stuff that people can't really easily be like, that's bunk, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not, I want to be clear. This is not just a book about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
This is a book about the intelligence networks that include Jeffrey Epstein, but are not limited to him.
Yeah. So I basically feel like you can't really understand Epstein unless you understand Epstein's network and how you understand that Epstein wasn't the boss of the network he was operating in either. Right. Because the whole point, what I really wanted, I think that's a really important point because, the whole mainstream narrative now is like, well, Jeffrey Epstein was the only naughty billionaire and now he's gone. And so everything's fine. And you've even seen people like Bill Gates, right? They're challenged about their Epstein relationship on mainstream media. And Bill Gates literally was like, well, he's dead. It doesn't matter. And that's a replica of his body language too at that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah. So, that's basically the excuse they're running with. But the point is, this network existed well before Epstein came on the scene.
Yes.
And now that he's gone, it continues to exist. And so we have to understand, what they've done besides Epstein and, what they're still doing. And all of that's really important. So what I'm trying to map out here is the development and continued existence over the years, the continuity of a key faction of the American political, power structure. I guess you could say. And I basically detail the origin of this particular group to the union of U.S. intelligence and organized crime in World War II, which is what Volume 1 is about. So Volume 1 is basically this whole network, all the sexual blackmail and other crimes they've been involved with over a span of several decades before Epstein gets involved. But it's very heavy on stuff that is required understanding to understand Epstein, and specifically Epstein's intelligence connections. So that's things like, what was BCCI and why does it matter?
Yes.
BCCI being the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. What was Iran-Contra and why does that matter? And where did Iran-Contra come from? Why Iran-Contra as a name is actually more of a misnomer, because it's not just about Iran and the Contras. Like, a lot more was going on than just arms for hostages as it's traditionally remembered, right? And I think people that sort of dabble in conspiracy land are, it's not really conspiracy, I think, but a lot of people in that sphere are aware that Iran-Contra also involved like drug smuggling to a huge extent, including into the US, the work of Gary Webb, Dark Alliance, all of that, right? So in Mena, Arkansas, the Clintons. So all of that is explained there. And a lot of the oligarchs involved, some of these intelligence operatives, a lot of whom were engaged in sexual blackmail. So by the time you're done with Volume 1, you have a very clear understanding that Jeffrey Epstein's behavior that he's infamous for is hardly anomalous. Like, he is not an anomaly in any sense. And once you get through Volume 2, it should be really clear to people that Epstein wasn't really just a sex criminal. He's a serial financial criminal. Who later started dabbling in sex crimes.
That's what I took from this too, is that this sort of like, oh, Jeffrey Epstein was a guy running a sexual blackmail entrapment ring. That that was the final phase of his career. But he was involved. He was more aptly described as just a straight up criminal. He was into whatever crimes there were. He was running guns, involved in espionage, I would suspect, involved obviously in crimes. I mean,
money laundering. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he was, he was knee deep in this. But again, he also just had one of the franchises. It's like which franchise he had a franchise in this extortion ring, but he wasn't limited to him. There were others, and they worked with each other or worked for Crooks and Criminals International, as it's affectionately
it's other nickname.
Why does BCCI matter, and what's the origins of it? From the best description I've ever heard of it was that it was just the CIA's bank. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's the best way to describe it or not, because I don't think it was limited to the CIA. But
not at all.
But let's talk about this shady bank and why it sort of why it made appearances throughout the 80s and early 90s.
Okay, so it was founded in the 70s. I forget exactly the exact year. It was created by a Pakistani guy who was a very bizarre figure, not just into, financial crimes. He was involved with, I can talk about this in a little bit, sex trafficking on a huge scale. So BCCI, much more than a bank. Yeah. Originally it was created by this Pakistani guy, and Pakistani intelligence was involved, but also the CIA was involved. Specifically, Richard Helms is the guy, the CIA director that has been linked to the origins of BCCI. So, some of the people when BCCI collapsed in 1991, they testified, people that were high up in BCCI said that, it was a show, that it was really Pakistani intelligence. They were operating, under instructions of the CIA and setting up the bank. So I guess it is fair to say, in some ways that it was sort of like a CIA bank, but you also have a lot of involvement from Pakistani intelligence, Saudi intelligence to a huge degree. You also have Israeli intelligence in the mix. You have the CIA, and of course you have British intelligence involved, popping up here and there. They're never to be left out of the spoils, just like U.S. intelligence.
Yes.
Especially when, something like a country like Saudi Arabia is in their intelligence networks is knee deep in it, because obviously the U.S. and the UK both are very involved with Saudi intelligence to a significant degree. So there's a lot going on at this bank. Originally, it's sort of pitched as a development bank. It gets very involved in things like migrant remittances between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. It also gets really involved with the Carter administration. You have a lot of sort of figures in the Carter administration involved in it to various degrees. Who later become key figures in allowing BCCI to penetrate the U.S. financial system, people like Clark Clifford and Burt Lance. But then even the BCCI had like a philanthropic arm, and they co-founded, I think, something with Jimmy Carter directly when he left our office, called like Global 2000 or something like that. Some NGO flowery bullshit thing.
Right.
Yeah, so very involved with the Carter administration, in the 70s, but continue to be involved with the U.S. intelligence community far beyond that. They're also involved in weapons smuggling. BCCI have a major role in funding and financing Pakistan's acquisition of weapons, involved in not promoting, sort of, I guess, advancing their nuclear nuclear weapons research, which was, them in India sort of in this nuclear arms race at that time. So you have them already involved in several stuff. And as I mentioned earlier, and this pops up in volume 2. So in volume 1 and chapter 7, that book, that chapter deals with the origins of BCCI and all of this other stuff really extensively. In chapter 11, where I introduce Epstein, I talk there about BCCI's sex trafficking involvement, and it's just insane. You can actually read about it on archive.org. You go to the official congressional, I think it's a Senate report on BCCI, the BCCI affair, sometimes called the Kerry report or the Kerry Brown report. And it details, you can look it up. It details the sex trafficking stuff there, and it's mental. Basically, you have the head of the bank of BCCI, the money man, who's also involved, in the sex trafficking stuff. But he has basically a Pakistani, Ghislaine Maxwell, who goes and takes hundreds of underage Pakistani girls from different villages at a time to one of the big cities in Pakistan to teach them how to act. In terms of mannerisms and also sex techniques, presumably not unlike Ghislaine Maxwell, takes them shopping, gets them dressed. This is exactly what Ghislaine Maxwell did a lot of the time. And then they're taken to the princes of Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates. Some of them are prepubescent girls, and a lot of them ended up having signs of extreme physical violence from the sex trafficking. And this was to keep the ruling families of the UAE happy. And for different reasons. And they also provided them to other VIPs of BCCI. And this is according to the Senate.
Jesus.
So no conspiracy there. This is much more than a bank. They're very involved in money laundering. And so the thing is with BCCI too, is that, this stuff in the 80s and before in the 70s too, is so complex because it's really hard to separate three things: BCCI, Iran-Contra, and the Promise software scandal, because they're all interrelated. They have a lot of the same main actors, and they're just intimately interrelated. So, for example, BCCI ran the Promise software because Promise was used to track people and it was used to track money. And so it was used in terms of tracking money to find hidden money and to hide looted money, right? Find and hide looted money. And this is actually what in the 1980s Epstein said his job was.
That's what I was going to say. He was a financial bounty hunter, and that's what he meant, right? He worked with BCCI to
work with BCCI. Yeah. Well, now, so Steve Hoffenberg confirmed that to a journalist I know who I cite in the book, because I was going to co-interview Hoffenberg with him, but I couldn't for some reason. I think something came up with my kids, so I left him my questions, and he wouldn't talk about Epstein and BCCI on the record, but now he's deceased. So,
yeah,
can be mentioned now. But there was, already supporting evidence for that relationship existing. For example, that financial bounty hunting period. It's already been reported by, mainstream sources that Epstein's top client at the time was Adnan Khashoggi, who at that point in time intimately involved in Iran-Contra already. His main bank for those illegal gun deals was BCCI. And other things. He was also involved in the saving and loan crisis of the 1980s. Khashoggi was. Presumably Epstein was as well.
I was going to say, there's a lot of the savings and loan topic comes up over and over again in this book.
You have some of the main people involved in that, like with the Drexel Burnham Lambert Bank, the Michael Milken people, all around Epstein. So it's very possible there was involvement there. And I cite for the savings and loan stuff, the work of Pete Bruton, who started reporting on that when he was at the Houston Post, forced out of his mainstream media job, threatened a lot, but wrote a book on the savings and loan stuff. And it was his conclusion that it was organized crime and intelligence that basically pulled that off and took $6 billion in 1980s money out of the savings and loans. And then the people in power that were involved in these same networks, Reagan and Bush, turned everyone's attention to Iraq. And that's the first Gulf War, to keep people from paying attention to the extreme looting of the American economy. And what happened there is that a bunch of these corporate raiders that worked with these guys, like Drexel Burnham Lambert, for example, they took over corporate America. So what they didn't already own in corporate America, they just completely took it over. It's wild.
Michael Milken has had the biggest, best PR makeover I've ever seen of a human being. They have taken him from like scumbag extraordinaire to cancer survivor, philanthropist.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, it's interesting to look at his institute and COVID stuff,
Oh, I haven't.
The Milken Institute, for example, hosted that panel in 2019 that has Fauci, Margaret Hamburg of Dark Winter fame, and this is where they essentially say, it went viral a few months ago, I think, of them basically saying we have to find a way, the right situation to get RNA stuff on the market and to get people to want to take, universal flu shots every year and stuff. We have to find a way to remove the regulations so we can make it faster and all this,
Wow. Well, they found a way, didn't they?
Yeah. So speaking of Michael Milken, though, okay, so I don't want to get too far ahead of stuff, but Michael Milken, the Gates Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, all created around the same period. Epstein was really involved with the Clinton and Gates Foundation, and they follow the same model of philanthropy, which is basically like impact investing, but not for social good impact, for the impact these billionaires want, like they're, whether it's eugenics or whatever, some sort of end game like that, impact investing in that sense. So it's not really traditional philanthropy. And
what's
this
Milken's
really starts in the 2000s and takes off.
What's Milken's impact investing? Is it cancer research?
No, it's this health stuff. Yeah. Well, I guess it's not just cancer. It's like everything. It's the tech and healthcare. I mean, the Milken Institute, you can go and peruse all their many programs and how Michael Milken's about page on his, it's just so beyond when you know what he was involved with. It doesn't mention that he's a convicted felon anywhere, in case you were wondering.
Well, I'm sure that's just an honest mistake. They left that one out.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the 80s, right? I don't want to get too far far off. So hopefully I sort of touched on BCCI enough, but basically Epstein was involved in serial financial crimes in the 1980s that involved intelligence and gun running.
Yeah, and gun running too. We'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about the touchy subject that wound up getting Danny Casolaro killed, and that is the Promise software. That was a linchpin of this whole operation. It seems like that brought together multiple nations, multiple intelligence apparatuses, the worst scumbags in the world, all around this one piece of software. And then the concept of, or the power of the Promise software, I would suggest, and I think you'd probably agree, eventually led to the Maxwell sisters, the Isabel and Christine Maxwell, staying in that line of software related.
They took that over from Robert Maxwell's portfolio. Yeah, because Robert Maxwell is one of the key guys involved in the Promise software scandal. And then, of course, he dies in 1991. And at that point, the Maxwell sisters, including Ghislaine, are like, they openly say, we were trying to circle the wagons and rebuild our father's legacy. So we made this tech company called the McKinley Group. And that's when they started working with Bill Gates directly in Microsoft. So the Epstein-Bill Gates relationship really does go way farther back than 2011.
Yeah.
Like they like to say.
I remember having Magellan as a
it was a
browser,
search engine.
A search engine, yeah. And not knowing that's a Isabel Maxwell or Christine Maxwell, one of those. Yeah,
no, it's both of them. And Ghislaine was heavily invested in it as well. And Kevin Maxwell was one of the business brains behind it, did a lot of advising. They all had stakes in it. So when they sold out in 1996, they all got a big payday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Ghislaine Maxwell, while sex trafficking with Epstein throughout the 1990s, when she was asked by the press, like, it's been X number of years after Robert Maxwell's death, what are his children doing now? In British media, she'd be like, I'm an internet operator. That's what she'd say. So she may have been more involved with the company than people have let on. But it was Isabel Maxwell that was most involved in terms of establishing alliances with big tech companies. And she definitely had a personal relationship with Bill Gates well before the year 2000.
That's what I was going to say. That Epstein connection to Bill Gates rightly came from the Maxwells, right?
Totally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that's why they won't go there. That's why they're like Epstein and Gates 2011. They don't want to look before then, even though there's British media articles from 2001 saying Jeffrey Epstein's fortune is from three men: Leslie Wexner, Donald Trump, and Bill Gates. And that's in 2001. So
they hung him out to dry, but protected the Maxwells, right? There's more tied to establishment, intelligence, monarchy, and everything.
So why does Epstein get suicided in prison, and Ghislaine Maxwell's now in country club prison with a relatively light sentence considering everything?
Yeah. I think that the tech angle catches people off guard. I think it's very, it's Silicon Valley. Oh, it's all happening and on Sand Hill Road and it's all that. Well, a lot of it's happening in Israel. And if it's happening in Israel in the tech industry, then it's got Maxwell fingerprints on it in some way, shape, or form.
A lot of it does.
A lot of it does. And so this Promise software. So let's talk about this. Just explain what it was supposed to do, or what the software did, and why it was stolen, and why it was repurposed, and why it was such a valuable asset to these people.
Okay, so basically what Promise, to summarize it really briefly, what it allowed people to do was track people and money like never before. So basically you have massive databases, but it's difficult to organize and search that data, especially in the 1980s. So this software was revolutionary, its ability to basically turn those masses of data into actionable intelligence. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. So it's being used by the Department of Justice. And by 1981, the CIA is trying to shop it around all over the U.S. national security apparatus, even though they later claimed they had no idea that they were doing that at the time. Anyway, Freedom of Information of Act requests tend to shed light on things that they deny. Anyway, around 1982 or so, an Israeli spy master named Rafi Eitan comes and tries to visit to the U.S. and to basically steal, with the plans to steal Promise. He succeeds in doing that in early 1983. A software developer in California who's Israeli American is contacted, puts a backdoor into that software. And then one of his Rafi Eitan's cronies, who's actually an American that worked under Ronald Reagan and ran his healthcare stuff when Reagan was governor of California, named Earl Bryan, starts basically shopping this software around and succeeds in selling it, for example, to the intelligence service of Jordan, being like, you can turn all this stuff into actionable intelligence. How great for you, but not telling them obviously that Israel will have a backdoor into it and be able to see everything they do and look for in real time and have access to all of their sensitive data. So, that alone was a big coup for Israeli intelligence. But Earl Bryan is like an awful human being. His nickname was like the man who walks over the dead or something like that.
Jesus.
And this is the guy that was in charge of like healthcare. He's like a healthcare executive. So, I mean, obviously not a personable guy, you know?
No.
So Rafi Eitan was like, I need a better salesman. And he decided it was Robert Maxwell. And Robert Maxwell had been an asset of Israeli intelligence as early as 1961. And oddly enough, the FBI was investigating him from the early 50s and then stopped their first investigation into Maxwell in 1961 when he became an asset of Israeli intelligence. If those two things are connected, I do not know, but it is certainly a coincidence.
Yeah.
Anyway, Eitan talks to Maxwell about it. Maxwell is on board, starts acquiring lots of companies all over the world, mainly in Eastern Europe, Israel, and the US, that are used as front companies to sell promise. A lot of the proceeds are laundered and given back to Mossad. Maxwell obviously pockets a lot of them. Some of those expenses or some of those profits are used to bribe powerful U.S. politicians like Senator John Tower, who is probably the main accomplice of Maxwell in selling this stuff to sensitive U.S. laboratories and facilities. Incidentally enough, same time, the same year that Danny was murdered or suicided, rather. Barrow's main sources is found murdered. Alan's by William Barr, that BCCI are part of. So 1991 was a big cleanup year for all of this stuff that went on in the 1980s in a really big way. And of course, it's William Barr at the center of it. Attorney General, Epstein, among other things. But, when he's a mop-up man. That's his career, really, for the CIA, more or less.
Yeah.
Because he worked for the CIA back in the 70s. Been alleged by people that were involved directly in Iran-Contra gun and drug running to have been an emissary of Bill Casey for, Iran-Contra activities under the pseudonym Robert Johnson, involved with a Southern Air Transport. And would introduce himself as the counselor for Southern Air Transport, right? So, William Barr's had a very storied career. He, of course, has a conflict of interest when it comes to Epstein and really should have been obviously recused in the Trump administration, not just because he works for the law firm that represented Epstein at the time. It represented Epstein, but he also, his father hired Epstein.
That's what I wanted to get into.
70s. At the time when Barr was already working for the CIA is when his father hired Epstein.
Yeah, this is just too many coincidences and overlap that can't be dismissed in this case. So you've got Epstein coming up as an unqualified physics teacher, math and physics teacher, who, or maybe he was slightly qualified, but then there's the stories of him going, being this high school teacher and then showing up at the high school parties and trying to pick up chicks and all of his typical Epstein.
Well, apparently that wasn't weird at the Dalton School. Like other professors did that. That presumably Donald Barr had also hired. So it makes you wonder, right? And then Donald Barr, like the year or two after he leaves the Dalton School, writes the Space Relations book about sex, slavery, and aliens. Yeah,
right.
He's also, I should say that Donald Barr is also, U.S. intelligence veteran, worked for the precursor to the CIA in the OSS.
Yeah, I think
ran a talent identification program for gifted high schoolers.
Which was Epstein one of those?
I think he may have been. I don't say that in the book, but I think I do mention that Donald Barr was involved in that. Because I don't know for a fact, right? But I suspect it was possible because Epstein was a very gifted teenager. He graduated from high school, I think, 2 years early. He was also like a gifted, had a lot of musical talent.
Yeah.
Apparently was very gifted in math. So it would have made sense for him to have been sort of picked up by this Columbia University talent seeking program that Donald Barr was involved in. And programs like that are often feeders for intelligence agencies.
Right. So he goes through Dalton. He winds up leaving. He goes into the bank, goes to Bear Stearns. He gets into like the fast track with all the big guys there. You know, and
it's very fast track. He starts working with the elite clients of Bear Stearns. By the way, during the exact period of time that Epstein's at the bank, Bill Casey is the lawyer for Bear Stearns.
Okay.
And then January 1981, Bill Casey becomes CIA director for Reagan. 2 months later, Epstein leaves Bear Stearns, apparently under legal advice because of an issue with the SEC. So that means the person...
Like a $2,500 fine? Something like that?
Yeah. The reason for leaving doesn't make a lot of sense. What I speculate about in the book is that I think it was likely that it was going to cause a lot of problems for Alan Greenberg, the head of who was then the top executive, the top guy at Bear Stearns, but had originally hired Epstein. Epstein was his main protege, really, there at the time. He probably had others too, but like one of the main underlings of Greenberg was Epstein, and Greenberg brought Epstein to Bear Stearns from the Dalton School.
Yeah, and so Epstein was going to bring too much heat on Greenberg, so he said, "You got to go." And it's a good time. It's a good time to go anyway.
Advice. So the person that would have given that legal advice would have been the lawyer that took over Bill Casey's portfolio right when he became CIA director, who was probably, we can assume, a Casey crony. And also, Bill Casey did not divest from his business interests when he became CIA director. And there was a lot of, complaining in the mainstream media about that throughout the 1980s. So it's very possible that Casey could have gotten involved himself. What I do find particularly interesting is that as soon as Epstein is, forced to leave Bear Stearns, he begins the shadowy financial bounty hunter career and takes on Adnan Khashoggi as a client. And at the same time, Epstein is taking Adnan Khashoggi as a client. Not only is Khashoggi getting involved in this Iran-Contra stuff and the Contra support apparatus that Bill Casey is spinning up, but the two people that work closest to Bill Casey on the Reagan campaign in 1980 also take on Khashoggi as clients at the same time. And that's Robert Keith Gray and that's Roy Cohn. So both of those guys are involved with it, as I note extensively in Volume 1, intimately involved with intelligence-linked sex blackmail operations extensively. And also Khashoggi also did sex blackmail on his yacht, which he later sold to Trump. So this is definitely quite a web. But like I said earlier, you learn who all these guys are, and Epstein isn't an anomaly anymore at all. No. All these guys did this sex blackmail, sex trafficking stuff to like a significant degree, especially Khashoggi. So
yeah, we've got there's a faction out there that wants to say Donald Trump is different. He's an outsider. He's not part of. Well, let's talk about this for a second, because Donald Trump's lawyer was Roy Cohn, and Roy Cohn was running a sexual blackmail operation, and Roy Cohn,
among other things, involved in organized crime and all sorts of stuff. Basically royalty in the B'nai B'rith secret society, which is intimately involved with the rise of the Wexner Foundation. Edmund Safra, Edgar Bronfman, Leslie Wexner's mentor, B'nai B'rith during basically ran B'nai B'rith's most influential chapter, the New York chapter, for a really long time.
So Trump obviously is Israel connected by default.
Yeah, like super connected. Yeah. I don't really see how people don't see that given his actions.
I think they don't want to see it. There's some people that just don't want to see it, but it's there. And the Khashoggi. So the arms trafficking part. I guess I wasn't overly surprised by it, but it's not something that gets talked about a whole lot with regard to Epstein, but he was deeply involved in the weapons trade, right? Yeah. And that comes in the 80s.
And possibly the 90s. I do talk about that in Volume 2. I don't know if you got to that.
I haven't. I don't know if I've got to that part yet, but
okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's look, if there's money and it's shady, he seems like he was interested in it.
Yeah, totally.
He liked that. I think he got off on feeling important and being important. But there's also a lot of money to be made, and he's in all the things that you can make the money in: banking, guns, kids, Was he involved in drugs? Was he running drugs?
As far as I know, I didn't find any evidence of the drug link. But honestly, I think for Epstein, sorry, I mean, money laundering, gun running, and sex trafficking is a hell of a lot. So it's hard to do all four, even for someone like him. Yeah.
He's definitely a triple threat where he had access to this. But this the weapons component to this, that brings you into the orbit of the Clintons, right? This gets you into Iran-Contra. This gets you into Mena, Arkansas. This gets you into this whole relationship in the 80s going on. So let's talk about Epstein's relationship with the Clintons, because this was one that was sort of like, oh, Bill just went to the island a bunch of times, probably to get away from Hillary.
When he wasn't president anymore.
When he wasn't president, but who could blame him? I'd want to get away from Hillary too, and boys will be boys, and all this crazy shit that people used to dismiss it. No. This guy made 17 trips to the White House with Mark Middleton in 94 and 95.
Most of it was in 94 and 95. It's in less than 2 years. He makes the 17 visits. Yeah. And I think about 15 of those were with Middleton. Yeah.
And then Mark Middleton winds up a couple months ago hanging from a tree in Arkansas with a noose around his neck and a shotgun blast in his chest.
Yeah. The noose is an extension cord, not even a rope. And it's on a property of an NGO tied to the Clinton Foundation. We're all surprised by that. I know.
Right.
So
what was Epstein doing during these 17 visits to the White House? What was his purpose?
Okay. Well, it seems like you didn't get there yet. So, get ready.
I kind of know. I know, but I'm just asking you.
Okay. Yeah. So, mentioned earlier the gun running in the 1980s. A lot of what Epstein was doing there specifically involved running Chinese-made weapons to Iran and Iraq during the Iran and Iraq War. During that war, really Iran and Iraq during those years was China's main market for arms exports. So in the 1980s, you have Epstein already sort of pretty well linked to the military military industrial complex of China. In the 1980s. And a lot of this is through his mentor in these worlds, Douglas Leese, who was a partner with Khashoggi and these things, who opened a joint venture with Norinco, the Chinese arms manufacturer, during this period of time. So by the time you get to the 1980s or the 1990s, we're going to skip over some of the other Clinton stuff and go straight to Middleton because the Epstein-Clinton relationship goes back at least to 1993, possibly earlier, but we don't really have evidence for that yet. So when it comes to Middleton is intimately involved in another scandal while he's meeting with Epstein. That scandal is remembered today by a lot of people as Chinagate, but I would say it's a little more complex than just Chinagate. I think it's more accurate to call it Riyadh-gate, perhaps, because this is dealing with some of the oligarchs behind the Clinton family in their political rise. You have Jackson Stevens and you have Mokhtar Riyadi. Mokhtar Riyadi is an Indonesian billionaire who is a business partner of Jackson Stevens. They were both involved with BCCI, for example. And Jackson Stevens, I mean, what awful thing was he not involved in? He's like a major Arkansas billionaire guy, but this is such a tangled web to really explain in a short interview.
I know.
One of Jackson Stevens' companies was Systematics, which was basically one of the main ways to get the Promise software onto the banking system for U.S. intelligence and also Israeli intelligence. It was collaborative. And, you had Khashoggi involved in that stuff too. I mean, it's really mental. So anyway, Jackson Stevens involved with that. Jackson Stevens, all his companies were represented by the Rose Law Firm in Arkansas, where you have people like Hillary Clinton, Webster Hubbell, and Vince Foster. Vince Foster, very involved with Systematics and the intelligence aspect of that, which obviously looms large in his death. In 1993 or so. So anyway, Mokhtar Riyadi ends up becoming a business partner of the Chinese government in the early 1990s, just as Clinton's becoming president. He was very involved in financing Clinton's campaigns for governor and cozy with them, throughout that period. And obviously, as a business partner of Jackson Stevens, their business interests mingled to a significant extent, both inside the U.S. and outside of the U.S. Not really, it's very difficult to separate them. So you have a lot of crazy stuff going on with Chinagate and Mark Middleton. Mark Middleton is very involved with the Riady family. And actually, after he leaves the Clinton White House under the cloud of scandal, he goes to work directly for the Riadys and then engages in even more scandalous behavior, I guess you could say. That was later the subject of a congressional investigation that was conveniently stopped by 9/11, among other things that 9/11 conveniently stopped investigations into. We can get there in a second. But basically, there was a problem for these Chinese weapons dealers by the time Epstein was meeting with Mark Middleton. Basically, what happened is Bill Clinton had banned, under pressure from his own party, had banned the importation of Chinese weapons into the United States, because after the Iran-Iraq war ended, the biggest market for Chinese weapons became the United States, and it was being used to fuel gang violence in a huge way. Because it was just flooding American inner cities, Chinese weapons, because they were cheaper and, it was their main market. So basically Clinton cuts that off. And in exchange, she gives China what the Riadys, who were in business with the government of China at this point, had been lobbying Clinton for, which was MFN status, or most favored nation trading status.
Right.
And so basically Clinton offers, delinks that from concerns about human rights in China, allowing them to have MFN status indefinitely, basically, no matter what they do domestically or really anywhere else, which was a contentious issue at the time. But says, but we'll, ban your importation of weapons. But it's not really like that, because you know how the Clintons are. So eventually it gets caught. The ATF does a sting, and because there's these state-owned arms companies are smuggling the weapons in to the United States. And the sting is, what's the right word for this? Basically, the White House, someone at the White House informs China that the sting is going to happen. And so it gets scuttled, basically. And a lot of that scuttling of that particular sting is intimately involved to the Chinagate people, and a meeting that they had planned between one of these top arms dealers, one of China's top arms dealers, and Bill Clinton in February. And Middleton is all over this stuff. Okay, where does Epstein fit in? Epstein's meeting with Mark Middleton. Pretty much every time he comes to the White House, he's bringing some hot babe with him. On one of these occasions, he appears to take Middleton from the White House to his island. Yeah.
And then to the Bahamas.
That's what I mean. He takes him to the Bahamas, and I can assume that from there they go to the island. I don't really know, unless they're doing other stuff in the Bahamas. As I know, a lot in Volume 1, a lot of these business networks do illegal shit in the Bahamas, but it seems like a lot of the illegal financial stuff Epstein was doing in the Caribbean was in Bermuda. Which is where Douglas Lease had a lot of his stuff, and also John Doyce, I think is his name, or Deuce, who is a very shady oil trader. Basically, what Mark Rich, his relationship with Israeli intelligence, it's like John Doyce and U.S. intelligence. They're like intelligence-linked shady oil traders. Epstein very involved with this John Doyce's network to a significant degree, which I point out a couple times in the book, and actually found him his wife at one point, which Epstein seemed to do for a lot of these guys, including Trump and, other powerful people. But, story for another time, I guess. So anyway, concurrently to all the stuff going on, you have Epstein getting involved with Southern Air Transport and getting Southern Air Transport moved from Miami to Columbus, Ohio, to run cargo from Hong Kong to Columbus in a way that is very sketchy and sketches out all like a bunch of people in Ohio, including the inspector general, who basically openly says to local reporters that this is the CIA and organized crime involved in some fuckery. Basically Leslie Wexner, retail billionaire. He had a partnership with Mast Industries in Hong Kong, which produced a lot of their products. But why would you insist on having Southern Air Transport brought in to do that out of all the airlines in the world, to run textiles. You don't need Southern Air Transport for that. No. So what is Southern Air Transport? Why does that matter? This is like the CIA airline par excellence, involved in Iran-Contra, involved in shady stuff in the Gulf War. And then after the Gulf War, they're like, we're not tied to the CIA anymore. We're going to go work for Leslie Wexner.
Yeah, great.
Basically, all of the politicians in Wexner's pocket make this really attractive and expensive for Ohio taxpayers package to entice Southern Air Transport to come to Ohio. And it wasn't even their first attempt, the successful one. They relocate in 1995, just as Middleton leaves the White House and Epstein stops meeting with Middleton, obviously, at the White House. It seems like this, and, this whole ATF thing, going awry. All pretty much happen within a year of each other, more or less. So, I posit in the book for other reasons too, that I think the Southern Air Transport relocation and the Middleton meetings are interrelated.
Yeah.
And it's not just the Douglas Lee Norinco stuff for that. There's other stuff too, like a company involved with Robert Maxwell and Iran-Contra, that was called Geomilitech. They basically developed this plan where US, Israel, and China would be bound by this complex circular trading agreement involving arms deals and technology transfers. And you see technology transfers and arms deals all over this like Middleton Chinagate stuff. And it becomes really apparent quickly the more you look into the 1996 campaign. It's not just China. So I think, again, Chinagate is a misnomer. You have these Chinese weapons guys and people tied into that world within China. And then you also have what I guess I would call the Maxwell Mafia, which is basically like Israeli intelligence plus like, the Russian mafia and these guys that all come together with Robert Maxwell. And to know more about that, you have to read volume 1, because there's like so much stuff going on here and so much history. Like it's hard there had to be like a precursor book to explain everything. Otherwise volume 2 makes no sense. So, well, not no sense, but less sense.
Well, I read volume, like I said, I'm reading volume 2 first for whatever reason, just because you said, these chapters, make sure you read these chapters. I started on those first. And so, and what I've noticed is that a lot of it references back to in volume 1.
Yeah.
There's that.
So this company, Geomilitech, was involved with arms dealing with Maxwell directly. And so it's very probable that those networks knew about this plan back then. And I posited back in volume 1 of the book that the so-called enterprise, which is the group that was behind Iran-Contra, the arms and the drug smuggling and all of that, was probably going to move into that eventually if it hadn't been discovered and there hadn't been investigations and all of it. And it looks like it did go ahead, and that it went ahead with Epstein and these other guys, under the Clinton administration. And it's not that surprising given Clinton's history back when Iran-Contra was going on. Would he have behaved any differently once in the White House? I doubt it.
Oh, God, he would have been worse, if anything.
But, this is really important stuff, I think, because this whole Chinagate thing, and I'm just going to call it that because that's how most people know it. But like I said before, you intimately have the network that Robert Maxwell put into motion. And I guess as a sidebar really quick, John Patrick O'Neill, who's like this top FBI guy that died on 9/11. Well, he wasn't working. He had left the FBI just a few months before 9/11. But basically, he said in 2000 that when Robert Maxwell was still alive, he had set into motion a truly global coalition of criminals. And basically what Robert Maxwell did was bring together East Asian organized crime, Russian organized crime, Israel, and, associated elements in UK and US intelligence together into business operations.
Wow. He brought, did he bring Stanley Ho from Macau in? Is that part of the group
I don't think Stanley Ho does come up, but in relationship to the Chinagate stuff, I don't have a connection between him and Maxwell specifically. So basically he talks about it. This O'Neill guy talks about it having been like the Yakuza, which is Japanese organized crime. But anyway, you have like these groups, like in volume 1, I talk about how all these groups from decades ago were involved with like the KMT, the ruling party of Taiwan, the opium trade and all of this stuff. And but when it comes to the Chinagate stuff, you intimately, it becomes hard not to see how China also has this intelligence organized crime melding going on too, especially as it relates to Macau, which is like China's Las Vegas. Yeah. And of course, everyone knows in the US, the role of organized crime historically in Vegas, right? So it's not that different in China, in Macau.
Yeah. I lived in Vegas for a long time and went to Macau on business once and saw what's going on there. And it's just like it's like a mini version of Vegas, except it's really sterile, very weird. When you go in the casinos in Vegas, there's like ding, 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 ding. And there's this vibe and there's all this like buzz. And when you go in a casino in Macau, it's silent. It's totally silent, and the nobody drinks alcohol there. Like nobody's drinking, and it's a totally different vibe. But I remember the stats showing, and this immediately made me think money laundering. But the stats were showing that in Vegas, an average blackjack table would take in $2,200 a day, and they're saying in Macau the average blackjack table would take in $22,000 a day. And I thought, God damn, for such a weird place, it just seemed it just stunk like money laundering. But that's my conspiratorial mind sort of injecting that into it.
Hey, it would make sense. It would make sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, I forgot why I brought up that sidebar about Maxwell and the Global Coalition of Criminals. Oh, yeah. The people in Chinagate, basically. But it's mainly like the Russian mafia to penetrate the U.S. financial reports. Right. So you see a lot of those guys, including like who were business partners of Maxwell, like openly, like documented, known business partners of them, being involved in meeting with Clinton and in these weird campaign money laundering financial shenanigans of the 96 election. And you have like Lou Wasserman of MCA, written about like Reagan, MCA, and the mob and all of that. Those same networks are there too, and this 96 stuff. So obviously those they're not Chinese. So you have like a mix. These are the two main groups involved. One of the guys most involved in really shady stuff going on during this time, George Schwartz, who is really like, if you read my book, you will see how guilty this guy is and how he has really sold out U.S. national security in a huge way since the 90s. It turns out that this is the guy that rescued Biden's primary in 2020 and is basically responsible for foisting Biden on the world. Oh, so God. Our senile ice cream eating president. So when I talk about, some people may think this is, ancient history, 96. Why do I care? That was so long ago. It has relevance today. It has relevance today when you think about someone selling out our national security to our supposed adversary in China, right? And then you think about Hunter Biden's China stuff and Joe Biden, all of that. I mean, conservatives at least should be, very unsettled by this. And there was a reason the investigation into what happened in that particular campaign was shut down, because it is enormous. And I only really scratched the surface because I'm going over what we do know. But the investigation by Congress into this was shut down by George W. Bush, not by Clinton, by George W. Bush. Weeks before 9/11, he told Congress, I'm invoking executive privilege. The first time he invoked executive privilege as president was for this, to block documents about the investigations into specifically Mark Middleton from being made available to Congress. Mark Middleton is a White House staffer. He's like a special assistant to the chief of staff. Okay. Why is George W. Bush stepping in for that guy after he's already been gone for 5-6 years from the White House? It's not even his administration. He's stepping in to shield Middleton from scrutiny, from congressional scrutiny. That tells you that something really rotten was going on for the Bushes to step in for the Clintons. They're basically part of the same crime family at the end of the day. But when type of stuff, it's bad. There's obviously something there with Mark Middleton they don't want people to know about. Yeah. I think Epstein may be the key to unraveling it. I do. But we need to start looking, people need to dig back into this stuff because there are major implications for basically U.S. national security. And this is back 30 years ago. If it was that bad then, how is it now? I mean, basically the way I feel after writing about this stuff in the 90s and the espionage stuff going on with like Israel and China and the Clintons, is if China were to declare war on the US today, just it would be a joke. The US would just be obliterated because they've been given all of our stuff.
Wow.
They've been given all of our stuff. And it's been that way since the early 90s. That's basically how it looks to me.
There is so much in these books that we can't get to, and there's one part in the book that I'll tease a little bit, but we won't talk about it at all. But I'll just say that you got to read in volume 2 about Les Wexner, and you have to read about what Les Wexner says makes him do the things that he does, and you will be stunned to learn. Clinton's plane crash of him with a circular hole in his head to Caspar Weinberger being sold to. We've got Stephen Hoffenberg's death. We've got Mega Group. There is so much in these 2 books.
Yeah.
I have never been more certain that people will get their money's worth than if they go out and get these 2 books right now from Trying Day. I'm going to put the link in the description. It's important to support Whitney's work wherever you can. If you are not in a position to buy the books, but you want to share this interview with people, please do take that step right now. I think the information needs to get out there. These are sensitive topics. These are topics that get people in really bad positions. And it's been 25 years in some cases, 30 years in some of these, 40 years but it never really goes away. I think you did a tremendous job of organizing an insane amount of information in a way that is very readable. But you, like you said, you have to sort of, if you want to understand the Epstein part, you have to sort of back up and understand the network first. And once you understand the network, then you see where Epstein fits in the network, and his actions make a whole lot more sense.
Yeah. So basically, once you read this book, you'll basically understand who runs America. That basically is what it comes down to. But I think a lot of these groups that I talk about in the 80s, I think there was a split once Clinton got in office. I think it's the same network that was identified in Iran-Contra hearings as the Enterprise. The factions we see, Trump visibly, right, and Biden right now. So you have the internationalist camp, the Rockefeller, Kissinger, whatever nexus. By the 1990s, Jeffrey Epstein had gotten into that world. He was a member of the Trilateral Commission. He had a close relationship with David Rockefeller that we don't know enough about, but it's there. And I talk about it in the book. David Rockefeller is in the lesser known but equally real contact book of Jeffrey Epstein. Leon Black, the associate of Jeffrey Epstein, said, the reason I let Epstein run my foundation is because David Rockefeller loved him so much and put him on the board of Rockefeller University. That's Leon Black saying that in official documents given to the SEC about his relationship with Epstein on behalf of Apollo Global Management, which, by the way, was co-written by one of the guys that did 9/11 insider trading. Anyway, story for another time. But, that's a big deal. No one's talked about it, but David Rockefeller, important for a lot of reasons, and co-founded the Trilateral Commission, also involved obviously with the Council on Foreign Relations, where Epstein was a member for a long time. Epstein was not booted from the CFR after being outed as a pedophile and sex trafficker.
That won't get you kicked off.
No. He didn't leave. He wasn't kicked out until a few years later, and it was only over failure to pay dues.
Right.
Something like that. Yeah. So anyway, that's the ideological camp that he got involved with later on, right? And so he's involved with Clinton and Gates and all these guys that are obviously sort of part of that internationalist camp anyway, global solutions to global problems crowd, and then on the other side, you have the people, I think, behind Trump, who are a lot of the people that are either the descendants of, or even some of the same people from that Reagan era. That's why you have like someone like Edwin Meese, Reagan's attorney general being a top advisor to Trump in the 2016 campaign. And Make America Great Again, like that was Ronald Reagan's rallying cry also for a time. So I think basically at the end of the day, they were once the same criminal racket, but one wants to go along with the global governance, whatever, with the WEF and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And the other side wants America riding high as king of, covert sleaze around the world for forevermore. And I think those are really the two factions we have duking it out right now for the U.S., the U.S. presidency and basically control of the empire as it's imploding.
Right.
So, to understand these guys, you got to go back to the history and see how it all started. Yeah.
Heads they win, tails we lose. It doesn't. How's Unlimited Hangout? You ready to start doing more episodes now?
Yeah, well, I have been doing more episodes since I came back. So I did one talking about the book. I have one that just became public a few days ago. That's me and Catherine Austin Fitts talking about the Inflation Reduction Act. Because it's obviously not about inflation reduction. It does a lot of things.
Yeah, but they named it that.
Media, but even in independent media, I feel like people might be dropping the ball a little bit because it was all about the IRS part of that act. But no one talked about how it makes literally a national green bank and a public-private lending thing for all this like green gobbledygook. Yeah. And a lot of that money, that national green bank, is basically going to be funneling taxpayer money to Bill Gates's breakthrough energy catalyst. So Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and BlackRock, who all back that, are going to get your money to construct the green energy grid that they will control and will limit how much energy you can use in your home. You're paying for it, basically. So that's what the Inflation Reduction Act also has in it. So we talk about that and some other things. So please consider checking it out. And hopefully, obviously I'm going to be promoting the book and talking about Epstein stuff a lot. But I hope to get a lot more into this crap that they're trying to sell under the guise of climate change. They call them nature-based solutions, or NBS, but it's all this stuff like, we're going to save the world's ocean by making 50 unique financial products and things like that. And it's like the biggest insurance companies and bankers in the world being like, this is how we'll save the planet. And debt for nature swaps. They just did that with the government of Belize. They're really going hard in Africa and Latin America, buying up the natural world and the natural resources there under the guise of investing in natural capital. And really, I don't see anyone else covering this stuff except maybe Cory Morningstar is maybe one of the few people that actually gets in that world. So I'm hoping to get more involved myself because, a lot of people still talk about COVID and the vaccines, and that's good, but there's a lot of other stuff going on too. And it's definitely really clear that, they're either going to move from one to the other, or they're going to waffle us back and forth between environmental crisis, pandemic for the next, until 2030 or whatever. So, this is definitely something that deserves our attention too. So I hope to get into some of those things in the next couple months or so.
I agree. I got to hear that interview. You and Catherine Austin Fitts together talking about banking fuckery. Holy crap. That's going to be must hear. So I appreciate you coming back on. Of course, this book is amazing. The links are in the description for anybody that wants to check it out. I highly recommend it. Subscribe to Unlimited Hangout to find out what Whitney's doing with all her work. Whitney, you're the best. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Charlie. Great to be back.
All right, guys, if you like this episode, take the extraordinary step, the amazing step right now of sharing it with your friends and family. You can connect with me at the website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com, or you can find me on Twitter at macroaggressions. Thanks, everyone.